The calendar's always been a useful list in SharePoint, and you still will find a calendar on just about every SharePoint site there is. It might not look all that different, but in the 2010 version of SharePoint, it's more powerful and it's easier to use. For a start, we have an easy way of adding new entries to the calendar. I can either mouse over a particular day, where I'll get the add link, or I can even just double-click a blank area of the calendar itself. Rather than take me to a different screen, we get a pop-up window that allows us to add in the entry. And give it a time. Same kind of entry options that we'd had for SharePoint previously. You can make it a repeating event or an all-day event and so on. One new feature of this calendar is if I'd accidentally scheduled that on the wrong day, I can simply drag and drop it to a different day. Selecting one of the days itself will actually take me to the day view if that's what I'm looking for. If it's not, I can go to the calendar section of the ribbon and quickly change between day, week, and month views of the calendar. And on this part of the ribbon is something that is a new feature for this version of SharePoint called Calendars Overlay. The idea behind this is that it was an often requested feature that could we get a SharePoint calendar that would bring together appointments and dates from different areas, and you couldn't do that before, but now you can. By selecting the Calendars Overlay option, I get the ability to add additional calendars to be shown on this one. Now, the additional calendars will be shown just in read-only mode, but it's still very useful. I'm going to select the new calendar option. Using this screen, I can connect it to a different calendar. That calendar could be in another SharePoint site. It could be on this SharePoint site, but simply in another list. Or it could even be an Exchange calendar as long as it's shared and available. I actually have another calendar on a subsite that I'd like to use. My subsite is a document workspace that I'm going to use called Annual Report, so I need to give this calendar a name. I'll call it Annual Report. Doesn't really matter what I put here, because what it's going to ask is what's the address of the site that the calendar's in. Right now it's giving me the URL of my current site, and it's not actually here. It's one level beneath it. So I'm going to give it the name of the subsite and hit the Resolve button, which will then look in that SharePoint site and say, okay, you've got this calendar. Is that the one you want to show? I could potentially have multiple calendar lists on that. I'm going to say that will do. I can even select a color that my entries will be shown in this case, a light yellow, and then click OK. We can add up to 10 calendars this way, but once I click OK to go back to our original one, we see all those different calendars being brought together. The actual editable entries on this calendar are in green, and the read-only ones from a different SharePoint calendar are in yellow. That means while I could drag and drop the green entries, I couldn't do that with the yellow ones. They wouldn't actually allow me to move them or to edit them directly. If I do select the entry in them, it will pop up a different window that will take me directly to that other calendar. But a very useful feature to be able to combine calendars from multiple sources. Another new feature of SharePoint 2010 as regards calendars is what's called a group calendar. This is still a calendar, but it's more organized around the idea of viewing either multiple people's schedules or perhaps even using resources, things like conference rooms and availability. You get a group calendar on a group work site, one of the new site templates in SharePoint 2010, but you can actually add a group calendar to any SharePoint site if you find that the regular calendar isn't what you're looking for. But the calendar list in SharePoint is a really good example of a list where the underlying functionality hasn't really changed all that much, but improvements in the user interface make it much more useful.